You know that feeling when everything just clicks? Your mind is sharp, your mood is steady, your body feels like it's firing on all cylinders. That's not luck, that's what your body is capable of every single day. Now, I've looked into a lot of fish oil supplements, and honestly, most of them are mystery sourced, overprocessed, blasted with heat, and packed with synthetic add-ins. But this one is different. Omega-3 Rejuvenate from Big Bold Health starts with wild Alaskan salmon and cod, sustainably caught from some of the cleanest waters on the planet, and then it's processed at low temperatures to preserve what actually matters. We're talking about real omega-3s, naturally occurring vitamins A and D, and pro-resolving mediators, or PRMs, that help your body balance its own immune response. What does that mean for you? Clearer thinking, more stable mood, and real nature-based support for your heart and immune system. No shortcuts, no synthetic nonsense. And it was developed by Dr. Jeffrey Bland, a true pioneer in the world of complementary health. If you want to feel the difference, go to bigboldhealth.com/Hoffman. That's bigboldhealth.com/Hoffman and use code Hoffman for 20% off site-wide. Once you feel it, you'll know. Welcome to today's Intelligent Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ronald Hoffman. Today I want to share about a supplement that I'm really excited about. I think it is actually one of the breakthrough supplements of the decade. It's urolithin A, and it's incorporated in a product called Mitochondrial. And with us today is Dr. Brad Currier. He's clinical trial manager at Timeline, which is a Swiss biotech company with over 15 years of longevity research. And he comes to us direct from, I believe, Lausanne, Switzerland. Is that correct?
Yep.
So
yes, right here in Lausanne.
So thanks for staying up late, because it's afternoon here in New York, and it's time difference. But the kiddies are already put to bed, and so you've got a little quiet time for yourself. Timeline is a great company because they've done a lot of research. And they didn't just decide, okay, there's this thing called urolithin A, we're going to prove that it works. They actually did a search to find out what might be a plausible natural substance to support mitochondrial health. Do I have that correct, Brad?
Yes, it really came from just trying to understand why superfoods have the health benefits they do. And urolithin A, or the pure branded form known as Mitopure, Mitopure is just pure urolithin A, was discovered while studying the pomegranate.
Okay. So they knew that there was something healthy about pomegranates, because we know that epidemiologically, I think people who eat pomegranates, among other colorful fruit, there's a health benefit. They're unique compounds. But they actually zeroed in on this. Brad has a PhD in muscle physiology, and that'll be today's focus, because when it comes to a muscle, it's not just how big your muscle is. I mean, aesthetically, that's pleasing. When it comes to muscle, bigger isn't necessarily better. We also talk about muscle quality, and muscle quality is important as we age, not just to prevent falls and to prevent weakness and help with balance, but it's got some other important ramifications. And muscle is really in lately. The whole theory of maintaining muscle mass is not just a way of staving off frailty and providing you with the right aesthetics. There's a real health benefit to maintaining muscle. So we're going to focus on muscle, but there are other ramifications of the research they've done on urolithin A. So without further ado, welcome, Brad. And Brad has joined us in the past, but we always like to provide some new updates because the research keeps rolling in on the benefits of urolithin A. And front and center for today's discussion is a paper that just was published in Sports Medicine, which is, pretty preeminent publication for people interested in athletic performance, sports medicine. It's entitled Evaluating the Impact of Urolithin A Supplementation on Running Performance, Recovery, and Mitochondrial Biomarkers in Highly Trained Male Distance Runners. So take us through that study and tell us about its
Absolutely.
ramifications.
Yeah, well, thanks so much as always for having me. It's a treat to be able to talk and get into the science with you and your listeners. So yeah, this study we called it the Enduro study, but this was done in collaboration with a fantastic academic named Louise Burke, and Professor Burke is really on the Mount Rushmore of nutrition performance research, based down in Australia. And with this work, what we did is actually look in an elite performance setting. So we've talked about urolithin A, MitoPure, and all its benefits. And for most of the history, that was focused on healthy aging. And
Mm-hmm.
muscle is rightfully considered the longevity organ by many because of its functional and metabolic roles in our well-being. But of course, it plays a big role in athletic performance too. And that's an area that we've been continuing to explore with trials. So in this enduro study, we took these elite runners, and I'm not talking people who, are doing a marathon. These are people
Right.
who are truly elite and, going for the Olympics. So
Mm-hmm.
this was done in collaboration with the team during one of their training camps leading into an upcoming Olympic cycle. And what they did is during this training camp, it was 4 weeks long, they had the individuals randomized to either a MitoPure group or placebo group. They took the supplementation, all went through the same training for the 4 weeks. And before and after, we did a battery of tests. Notably, one would be the actual time trial, how they performed. And this is a 5 kilometer running test. And in this, what really stuck out to us was the indication of improved recovery. So this is one that came from the performance in the time trial. We saw a reduction in a marker called creatine kinase, which is representative of muscle damage.
It's a breakdown product of muscle, and just I'll tell you from a
Yeah.
medical standpoint, there is a condition where if you overexert, you break down muscle to the point where you are actually damaging muscle, and you actually can go into kidney failure. I think it's called myoglobinuria, where this is an extreme version of muscle damage from stress, because in effect you're stressing your muscles, but you don't want to stress them to the point where you cause literally breakdown products of muscle to clog up
Yeah.
your kidneys. You can end up on dialysis with that. So okay, so that's
Yeah.
the CK or
Yep,
CPK
CK.
is
And you're absolutely right. And maybe for context for people too. So the reason why it's a marker of this is because creatine kinase is the enzyme that metabolizes between creatine and creatinine. So when we're looking at, or excuse me, creatine, when we're metabolizing creatine, this is done by creatine kinase. And the 95% of our creatine is in our muscle. So we really only find this enzyme in muscle. And by taking a blood sample and looking at creatine kinase, we can see if it's present in the blood. And if it is, it's not supposed to be. So
right.
we can see that, 95% of this would be coming from muscle. And that's why it's a marker of muscle damage. So what we saw in this study was that the amount of creatine kinase was significantly reduced in the group taking MitoPure after the month of supplementation, suggesting that there might be some sort of improved recovery. There was less damage to the muscle during this maximal time trial.
Okay, so now one issue that comes up when you study elite athletes, you actually have studies on urolithin A in relation to aged individuals who are kind of infirm and slow. And it sounds a little counterintuitive, but it stands to reason that the people who might most benefit from MitoPure are kind of broken down individuals who are aging. And when you have athletes that are really on the bleeding edge of performance, there's not much more they can do to enhance performance. Wouldn't it be hard to find a significant? They're already in peak condition. They're young. They're healthy. They're even genetically selected to be outstanding performers. So it's kind of a challenge to actually see that this could help them.
You're absolutely right. When you're looking at the best of the best, so much to optimize their performance has already been done, whether
Yeah.
it be from the genetics or the decades of training and everything that goes into that. So I love the analogy of taking a wet towel and wringing out the water, right? For a lot of us, if we're trying to wring out as much water as we can, like that first ring is just doing any exercise. The second ring is
Yeah.
having some sort of good diet.
And some water's coming out. Some water's coming out with those
Water's
first
coming
twists.
out.
Yeah.
When we get to the best of the best, there's very, very little
Yeah.
water left in there, and it's hard
Well,
to move the needle.
there's an
So
expression. It's like squeezing lard out of a gnat. Heard that
I like
expression?
that. I haven't heard
Yeah.
that one,
Okay.
but exactly. So it is why this signal of the reduced marker of muscle damage. Some of the other results were actually a lower perceived exertion by the athletes. So they
Hmm.
didn't feel that they had to work as hard to have the same performance
Okay.
in this time trial. These are signals that we're not going to, it's not like the trials we've done in older adults where we see a 12% improvement in muscle strength without any change to lifestyle besides just a supplementation. This is a population where the differences are going to be so minute because they're such finely tuned athletes. And these signals, were really intriguing to us to look at how muscle recovery could be improved by Mitopure. And really that's a big interest of ours still. So it's an exciting thing to see. But when we can get into why we think that is, but we're targeting the mitochondria, and we know it's central to so many cellular processes. So it's not surprising to see that recovery could be something improved with Mitopure.
So just a disclaimer: this is not like blood doping or something like that. And in fact, in the study, it showed there was no, I don't think, increase in their speed or time.
Correct.
But that being said, there is a training advantage if you put in a lot of training and you
Yeah.
recover faster because you actually will have less downtime. Because there's some days where I kind of overdo it. And I was like, I'm going to skip a day, or I'm going to a very light workout because I'm all sore from the previous day's workout. And
Yeah.
so having better recovery means more consistent training, less interruptions in terms of your training regimen. So there could be ultimately an advantage for these athletes.
Absolutely. You're entirely right, where the recovery is such an important part for these athletes. The training is what it is. It's going to be individualized. But there was a great performance coach years ago. I heard this, but he said, "There's no such thing as overtraining, just under recovery." And I don't
Okay.
know if I would. I think it's a discussion to have, chicken and the egg kind of
Yep.
thing. But I love how that just emphasizes, recovery is instrumental to getting the most out of our training sessions. And it's across the demographics, right? Of course, for athletes, when we want to maximize performance, recovery is key. But also recovery is one of the most frequently cited reasons older adults, things they notice with advancing age is that, I recover slower from things that I used
Sure.
to bounce back
Yeah.
from.
It's inevitable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I'm noticing is less downtime. I mean, there's just some times where I kind of overdo it, and I feel kind of beat up, and I'll take a lighter workout day. But I pretty much work out 6 or 7 days per week without interruption, and I'm able to do that. And I think what I actually had been experiencing more brownouts before I started taking Mitopure, and I think Mitopure is
Okay.
part of the formula that look, there's no question that as one age, decade after decade, you're going to get slower. You're going to be a little bit more, have to be a little more cautious because you can't have more injuries.
Yeah.
Collagen isn't what it used to be, but it's important to maintain muscle. So, what about, could you briefly reference the other studies, which I think are more
Yeah.
compelling in terms of actual performance enhancement? Now, what actually, going back to the original thing, is that Mitopure didn't come to me. Mitopure didn't say, hey, we've got this product. Would you please endorse this? I went after y'all because I read the studies. I actually purchased the product at my own expense and tried it out, and then you recommended it to patients. And I started to think to myself, hey, the research is really exciting. I'm experiencing the benefits. I want to get the word out to my listeners and patients. And so Timeline was kind enough to offer your expertise and also to contribute to our website to get the word out and explain the benefits of this. And whether you're an athlete or not, some people may say, I don't care. I'm past that. I don't exercise anymore. Why should I care about Mitopure? But maybe you can explain.
Absolutely. And maybe I would say one of the reasons it's such a treat to speak with you on your show is that we can get into the science. And that's really something at Timeline we pride ourselves on. We're a group of scientists that, originally founded the company. And it was all PhDs, MDs. And really the mission is how can we improve health span? How can we help people with higher quality life for longer? And that's taking the scientific approach. It takes time. It's been, like you said, over 15 years of research to really get to this point with products only marketed in the last few years, because we wanted to make sure that anything coming out is clinically tested and, has the evidence to be efficacious. In terms of what someone can care about if they're not an athlete, it really comes back to the mechanism of action and how Mitopure works. So we talked briefly about mitochondria, but what Mitopure urolithin A is it's a natural molecule, like we said, but it's the only clinically validated supplement that stimulates a process called mitophagy, and that's the recycling of dysfunctional mitochondria. So in many situations, our mitochondria, like any organelle, have a time where they need to be recycled. They need to be broken down and re-synthesized into new components. That stressor or causing mitochondrial dysfunction can be our environment. It could be an intense training session. It could also just be aging, right? This is something that happens every day in every cell of each tissue in our body. And so really Mitopure is stimulating that recycling process where we can renew and improve the health of the mitochondria in our cells.
So, just to restate that, there are certain things that purport to rev up the mitochondria, like magnesium and B vitamins. They're sort of like the fuel that goes into the furnace to stoke metabolism. So, okay, fine. Ketone bodies, what have you. There's a lot of ways that this is being proposed. But Mitopure actually acts to cull the aged and inefficient mitochondria, get rid of them so that you have overall, there's no drag on the performance of the active, healthy mitochondria. Am I restating that correctly?
To stick with your analogy, a furnace, that's a great one where, we can put more things in the furnace to burn. We can try to make the furnace work better. At one point, that furnace needs to be repaired or replaced. Mm-hmm. And that's what Mitopure does. It's actually taken that organelle, the mitochondria or the furnace, and recycling it into a new healthy furnace. And that's what's so unique about Mitopure. Like you said, there are other things, all the that really try to hit. There are three components of a mitochondrial's life. We can think about it as biogenesis, or the creation of new mitochondria, mm-hmm. the efficiency of a mitochondria, so processes like fusion and fission, where we're trying to improve existing mitochondria, and then mitophagy, that removal and recycling of the dysfunctional mitochondria. That's really unique about where Mitopure hits, is that mitophagy part. And it's worth noting too, we're not just getting rid of all mitochondria. Mitophagy feeds into a feedback loop into mitochondrial biogenesis. So overall, we're having this turnover and renewal of mitochondria. We're not just getting rid of them.
Okay. So in other words, the more you get rid of dead wood, the more opportunities there are for regeneration of your mitochondria. Okay, folks, at this point, let's pause and allow one of our sponsors an opportunity to share an important message with you. So here goes. Listen up.
Kids don't just bring home homework, they bring home germs. And those germs don't just stay with them, they spread to the whole household. That's why Clear Nasal Spray was created by a practicing physician to give parents and grandparents peace of mind. You may not think about it, but your nose is filtering out a semi-truck full of air every single day. Clear isn't just another spray. It creates an additional layer of protection in your nose that blocks bacteria and viruses before they can even take hold. Yes, even that virus. Supporting your body's defenses right where germs first try to enter. Clear is a hygiene product recommended for daily use, drug-free, non-drowsy, and safe for all ages. Just a quick spray in the morning and evening helps you cleanse your nose. Don't just hope for protection, create it. Get Clear Nasal Spray, your daily defense. Clear Nasal Spray is available at retailers nationwide and online. Check out xlear.com for our special offers. That's xlear.com.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting our sponsors. They, of course, are what make Intelligent Medicine a continuing free resource to you. And now, back to today's guest, who is Dr. Brad Currier, Clinical Trial Manager at Timeline, a Swiss biotech company that is the maker of Mitopure. There are other nutrients that are purport to help the mitochondria. Creatine, there's, NMN and NAD and nicotinamide riboside. These kind of are, and also one of our sponsors also makes NT factor, which actually is a membrane component of mitochondria. So there's a variety of ways to approach the mitochondria. But so actually, I'm in favor of all of the above approach. And I think that this is a key, but it's not a one-note Charlie for mitochondrial support, in my opinion. I think it's just a very well-researched, very plausible way to help your mitochondria. So
I agree. And I think it can be complemented with other things. And, the evidence for each of those, CoQ10 is another big one.
Sure.
Where that, there's a membrane protein that's critical in the electron transport chain. The level of evidence for all of them is varied. I would say Mitopure, it does stand above with we just started our 28th clinical trial on it, publishing all of these. But the one exception I would say is creatine, because that in my opinion is the most well-studied, well-established supplement for muscle health, but really overall well-being. And like you said, that's something that complements the effect of Mitopure, where Mitopure is stimulating this recycling and renewal of mitochondria. Creatine operates in large part as a shuttle. So we talked about the creatine kinase enzyme, and what creatine does is increase in our muscle, and it helps actually shuttle the ATP, the adenosine triphosphate, our mitochondria are making, into the cytoplasmic or sarcoplasmic in the muscle space. So it's a key shuttle and buffer within the mitochondria and in the area around it. So that energy can actually get to the parts of the cell that need it to perform its function. And that's a great example of how, Mitopure, creatine, each of them are doing something distinct, but together, complement and really have an overall beneficial effect.
So when we think of muscle, we think of strength, we think of, in some cases, endurance, and those are important parts of how we can fend off age-related decline. But there's a whole new view of the role that muscle plays. And you being a PhD in muscle physiology, you must be really excited about that, because maybe, when you first opted to study this, maybe you thought, well, this is sports medicine, we're discussing some aspect of aesthetics.
Yeah. That's exactly how I got into it. I was a former athlete looking to improve my performance, and I spent more and more years in the research. My passion for what I would call helping the general population, like something that could help hundreds of thousands of grandparents, was more exciting to me than helping someone shave half a second off their, mile time. And so that is how I got into muscle physiology originally. But it is fantastic to see the recognition muscle's getting. Obviously, we know we need it to move. In the case of healthy aging, certainly there's mobility, and we can go on and on about how our physical function is so key to, yes, our independence and ability to interact with society, but the metabolic role of muscle is something that I think is just now it's kind of starting to ride a wave of attention, where outside of just movement, muscle is the primary predictor of our basal metabolic rate. About 80% of the calories we burn is entirely dictated by just how much muscle we have. So that's a huge component. It's where we store the majority of our glucose after we eat a meal. So it's the largest glucose sink.
So it's a buffer for blood sugar. And so people who are very skinny, whose muscles are atrophied, they have what can be termed brittle diabetes, like
No.
they're up and down all over the place because there is no storage depot for their blood sugar
Right.
on muscle sites where a
Yeah.
lot of glycogen, I think it is stored. And
Yeah.
hence, it's kind of like it's a buffer against ups and downs of blood sugar.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that too, because it's a fascinating area with just the blood sugar regulation and muscle. Certainly, the amount of muscle impacts that. But what's really unique about muscle as well is that you can have insulin independent glucose uptake. So certainly, insulin through the IGF-1 axis will transport that GLUT4 transporter to the membrane of the muscle. It'll take up glucose. But insulin isn't the only signal that will do that in muscle, and contraction is actually one of them, muscle contraction. So there is work that's been done looking at individuals with insulin resistance or pre-diabetes where exercise can help maintain a blood glucose. And you'll actually see that reflected in the exercise guidelines, where this is exercise opens a window of the muscle being sensitive to glucose for 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
And that's why the guidelines for people with diabetes is encouraging that they space it out every other day to
Hmm.
try to have that open.
Interesting. So, okay, so there's more to it than that because there are these things, and now I know the lingo, and you're very familiar with it, myokines. So
Mhm.
explain what those are, and why is it that mitochondrial support to help muscle function better helps to sustain levels of myokines?
Yeah, so myokines is kind of an umbrella term like we would think of, say, cytokines. And it's the same thing where we've got some sort of signal originating from a tissue that can have an impact elsewhere in the body. Myo meaning it just originates from the muscle. And a
And
lot of
kine means
times,
something that moves, like kinetic, kine, kinetic.
right.
It's a muscle, something from the muscle that moves something.
Yes, exactly. And so myokines, like I said, it's an emerging area of research, and that was one that I've been really interested to follow more because it's not something that was heavily involved in my training work as I
So
was
it's
going
so
through
it's that
the job.
new because you're a young guy.
Yeah, it's new, and I would say for a while, like for the last decade or so, I consider it relatively niche. But it the evolution of it has, I would say, what's niche about it has just exploded and kind of gotten bigger because we know what muscle can do, say locally with factors it'll excrete, but also systemically. And some of the original well, at least interest or curiosity was seeing benefits of exercise, which isn't entirely muscle, but it's a big part of it. And why are we having cognitive benefits with exercise, beyond just blood flow increasing? Why are we having this change in inflammatory profile? And how does that impact the well-being of
So
other
many
tissues?
ramifications throughout the body beyond the muscles.
Yeah, exercise really is a systemic stimuli. It's not just for the muscles. And so there muscle is or the myokine, excuse me, is a fascinating area. I think some of the what I find most interesting from the myokines do have to do with that kind of gut brain, muscle brain axis of how are there things in the muscle that could be contributing to some of these cognitive benefits? And that's one, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not a leader in this space, but it's one that I find very interesting and I'm excited to follow the research as it keeps coming out on.
Indeed. So suffice it to say that to have optimal metabolism, optimal immunity, optimal brain function, supporting your muscle, I think, makes a lot of sense. And,
It won't hurt.
it certainly won't hurt and looks good too. And, helps you feel good. Okay, so we've got lots more to discuss on, because this is the long form discussion on MitoPure, and we want to answer as many listener questions about MitoPure because there's a lot of excitement among my listeners and patients about Mitopure and urolithin A. And I think there's also a big uptake among them, to try this product and see how it works for them. So I encourage you to explore it. For more information to order, just go to timeline.com/Hoffman. Use coupon code Hoffman at checkout for 20% off. That's timeline.com/Hoffman for 20% off Mitopure gummies using code Hoffman. And so we're going to keep our expert on the line with us, coming to us from the headquarters of Timeline. It's a Swiss biotech company based in Lausanne, Switzerland. He's Dr. Brad Currier, who's completed his PhD in muscle physiology and is also a manager of clinical trials at Timeline. So he's very familiar with the research that substantiates its use. Also talk a little bit about an interesting ramification of urolithin A, which is that when incorporated in skincare products, it may confer benefits to aging skin. And he's holding up a sample of that right in front of us. Great stuff. All right, when we return, more on the subject of urolithin A with Dr. Brad Currier. I'm Dr. Ronald Hoffman, and this is the Intelligent Medicine Podcast.